I want you to imagine a perfectly engineered system.
Right.
Just picture this absolute marvel of subterranean infrastructure, right? It's deliberately designed with a lifespan of 200 years, built to be this completely silent, hyper-reliable foundation for an entire planetary colony.
A literal bedrock.
Exactly. But now, imagine that same robust system suddenly and quietly unraveling at the molecular level, and doing it after just 50 years.
Which is way ahead of schedule.
Way ahead. So what happens when an invisible infrastructure failure deep underground triggers a massive, sudden pediatric medical crisis on the surface? Today, we are opening up a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got mission logs, private medical comms, and engineering field reports from the starship USS Arawyn.
Currently orbiting the colony of Lathira IV.
Yep, Lathira IV. And our mission for this deep dive is to trace the invisible thread of a cascading, multi-departmental crisis. We're going to track a mysterious, terrifying medical emergency all the way back to its shocking root cause.
It's quite the journey.
It really is.
Right.
And along the way, we'll get an incredibly detailed, minute-by-minute look at how a highly trained crew actually operates. When the pressure is just immense, the clock is ticking, and the very foundation beneath their feet is turning to dust. Okay, let's unpack this.
To truly understand how a crisis of this magnitude unfolds, we actually have to start with something that seems completely disconnected from a planetary emergency.
Right, it doesn't start on the planet at all.
No, it doesn't. The first domino doesn't fall down on the surface of Lathira V with the medical crisis. It falls up in orbit, on the starship itself, hidden inside a purely statistical anomaly. Because in complex systems, and this applies whether you're operating a deep space starship or just managing the workflow in your own office, disasters rarely announce themselves with blaring alarms.
They don't just, suddenly explode out of nowhere.
Exactly. They almost always start as minor, easily dismissed deviations from the norm.
And I'm looking at the very first log in our stack, and it illustrates that perfectly. It's from a Lieutenant Jorik. He's a Vulcan medical officer on the Arawyn.
And Vulcans are all about those minor deviations.
Oh, absolutely. Jorik isn't sounding a red alert or anything. He's just bringing this dry, purely statistical observation to his Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Riah Amberlyn. Over the past 3 days, he's noticed there have been 7 distinct engineering-related injuries.
7 in 3 days is a spike.
Yeah. And he specifically highlights a repeat patient, a Lieutenant Caldwell, who just came into sickbay with these awful third-degree plasma burns on the back of his right hand, plus a 4.7-centimeter laceration.
Ouch.
Yeah, from working on unshielded EPS couplers on the technical array.
And the detail about the injury being on the back of the hand is actually quite telling.
Really? How so?
Well, it implies a reflex action. Caldwell was working on these unshielded EPS couplers, which, for those unfamiliar, are essentially the heavy-duty, heavily pressurized power conduits that carry raw, superheated plasma energy to the ship's tactical systems.
So, extremely dangerous stuff.
Very. He made a mistake, realized it, and reflexively yanked his hand back. And in doing so, he caught the ambient heat and scraped the back of his hand on the housing. It is a very specific, painful detail that points to a dangerous lapse in basic safety protocols.
And this is where Jorik's Vulcan logic really shines, I think. He doesn't jump to the conclusion that the engineering team is suddenly full of reckless mavericks who just forgot how to do their jobs.
Oh, he looks deeper.
Right. He deduces that these injuries are the direct result of systemic strain. The ship's chief engineer, Commander Elias Harlan, is just pushing his team to the absolute brink to get the tactical systems online.
And when people are pushed that hard for that long, the invisible safety nets are the first things to slip.
Exactly. Like taking the extra time to properly shield a conduit or run a full diagnostic sequence. Jorik recognizes that tracking and correcting these minor deviations now is the only way to prevent a catastrophic warp core breach or a massive localized explosion later.
Jorik is effectively treating the ship as a patient. He's diagnosing a symptom of a larger operational disease. But just as he's presenting this shipboard diagnostic to Dr. Amberlyn, the scope of their reality drastically shifts.
It is a massive pivot, just a total left turn. Amberlyn pulls up a developing crisis down on Lathira IV. The children in the colony, specifically those under 10 years old, are suddenly experiencing rapid, terrifying neurological decline.
It's heartbreaking to read the logs.
It is. We are talking about debilitating tremors in their hands and persistent involuntary head nodding. The local medical teams are in a state of sheer panic because the symptoms are tied to the Novaryn-C virus.
But here's the impossible part.
Right, these children have already been vaccinated against it. For some completely unknown reason, a universally proven pediatric vaccine is completely failing to protect them.
What's fascinating here is the immediate cognitive leap Jorik makes in that room. He transitions from treating localized plasma burns on a Starship engineer to engaging in high-level, cross-species pediatric triage without a second of hesitation.
He doesn't even blink.
Medical problem-solving in these extreme environments requires an incredible blend of abstract thinking and raw xenobiology.
And the interventions he suggests on the fly are just intense. He notes that human children have incredibly high neuroplasticity and incomplete blood-brain barriers, right? Making them uniquely vulnerable to this specific viral strain.
So he has to act fast.
Right. He immediately suggests neuroprotective interventions just to stall the tremors while they look for an actual cure. He recommends pediatric doses of modified glutamate antagonists,
Which act like a chemical volume knob, basically turning down the brain's overactive misfiring signals that are causing the tremors.
But then he goes a step further, and honestly, this blew my mind when I read it. He suggests using Borg-derived nanoprobe analogs to artificially reinforce the children's blood-brain barriers.
It's an incredibly aggressive strategy.
Right. He wants to program microscopic synthetic robots technology derived from one of the most feared, destructive adversaries in the quadrant to act as an artificial wall around these kids' brains to keep the viral damage at bay. He is pulling from the absolute extremes of medical technology just to buy these children a few extra hours.
And buying time is truly all the medical team can do until they understand the root cause of the vaccine failure. You simply cannot permanently fix a problem if you don't know what's breaking the system in the first place.
Which means we need more data.
Exactly. To find that out, we have to leave the medical bay, leave the ship entirely, and look at the environmental investigation taking place deep underground.
Okay, let's follow that thread down to the planet. We have a field report from civil engineer Thomas Hale. He and his team, Mira Ansel and Arden Koval, are deep below the colony surface. They're in Access Tunnel Gamma 12, right beneath the Kestrel Reach terraces.
It's dark, damp, and they're looking for answers.
Yeah, the colony just suffered an uncharacteristic 11-minute blackout, and they're down there investigating the load variances. Mira opens up a primary conduit housing, fully expecting to see smooth, resilient industrial insulation.
But that's not what she finds.
Not at all. She finds the material completely pitted and thinning. When Hale reaches out and touches it, the insulation literally turns to a fine ash on his glove.
It is critical to understand that this is not normal wear and tear.
Not at all.
Mira runs a deep scan, and her tricorder confirms the material is experiencing uniform molecular unraveling. The very chemical bonds holding the insulation together are just letting go.
It's just giving up.
Exactly. And this specific material was rated by the colony's founders to withstand severe radiation and extreme thermal variance for a minimum of 2 centuries.
But it's completely disintegrating at year 50.
Yep.
What causes a failure like that?
It's an extreme example of infrastructure fatigue, heavily compounded by the illusion of permanence.
The illusion of permanence. I like that phrasing.
Think about it. The founders of Lathira IV built this colony to last. They created incredibly robust power systems that automatically compensate for any localized weakness. If one sector of the power grid falters, the overall lattice simply reroutes the power from elsewhere in a fraction of a second.
So it's a brilliant, highly efficient design.
It is, but that very efficiency is fatal because it actively hides the underlying degradation. The system compensates perfectly, day after day, until it runs out of workarounds and reaches a catastrophic breaking point.
Wow.
We all have a tendency to rely on clever, short-term workarounds that keep our daily operations running smoothly. But often, those compensations are just masking a foundation that is quietly falling apart.
Okay, so the city is sitting on crumbling infrastructure. But how does subterranean ash translate into a pediatric medical emergency? That brings us to a pivotal joint video communications call. The source logs here are so vivid you feel like you're in the room.
They really paint a picture.
Dr. Claire Dunross, the Assistant Chief Medical Officer, has been up all night running continuous biochemical simulations. She's operating entirely on strongly brewed Earl Grey tea and absolutely zero sleep.
A very relatable state for many.
Oh, totally. And she finally delivers the breakthrough. The Novaryn-C virus isn't mutating at all.
It's the vaccine scaffold itself that's failing to integrate into the patient's systems.
Yes. She discovers a trace chemical polymer present in the blood samples of every single resident in the Kestrel Reach area. And this polymer is a perfect chemical match for the 50-year-old disintegrating condo insulation Hale's team found in the tunnels.
It's all connected.
because it's turning to dust, it's leaching directly into the municipal water supply. When the colonists drink the water, this invisible polymer enters their bloodstream.
And this is where the biochemistry becomes a tragic lock-and-key problem. This specific polymer happens to perfectly bind to the stabilizing matrix of the pediatric vaccine.
It just latches right on.
Yes. Imagine trying to put a key into a lock, but someone has already jammed chewing gum inside the mechanism.
That's a great analogy.
The polymer binds to the vaccine and completely neutralizes it before it can activate the child's immune system. The adults in the colony have broader, deeply established immune memory buffers from years of exposure to various pathogens, so their bodies can fight off the virus even with the neutralized vaccine.
But the children don't have that historical immunity.
They don't. They are entirely reliant on the vaccine, which is why they are taking the full, devastating hit.
Here's where it gets really interesting. As soon as Dunross explains this, Dr. Amberlyn immediately patches Chief Engineer Elias Harlan into this high-level medical call. And the visual contrast described in the logs is just incredible.
It's night and day.
You have these polished medical professionals sitting in sterile labs or neat quarters, presenting crisp, hard data. And then the video feed cuts to Commander Harlan.
His transmission is broadcasting completely sideways.
Yes, he is literally wedged horizontally inside a cramped Jeffries tube on Deck 8. He's smeared in conductive gel and metallic insulation dust, looking completely feral and sleep-deprived.
Not exactly your typical boardroom setting.
Not at all. He's trying to prop his data tablet up against a bulkhead, swearing under his breath, and actively dodging a heavy hyperspanner, which is essentially a massive hyper-advanced torque wrench that falls from the ceiling right next to his head.
Yet, despite the sheer physical exhaustion and the incredibly chaotic environment, pay close attention to his response in the logs.
It's so professional.
It really is. Dr. Dunross explains the complex polymer issue. Harlan doesn't get defensive. He doesn't throw up his hands and say, "That's a planet-side municipal problem, not my starship."
Right, he doesn't pass the buck.
He instantly absorbs the data and aligns with the medical team. He immediately commits to contacting his old connections in the local Lathira constabulary to trace the specific municipal water lines feeding that affected community.
He even casually catches a falling isolinear chip, basically a fragile glass hard drive with one hand, without breaking eye contact with the camera while he's mapping out the infrastructure plan.
It is a masterful illustration of how solving complex, systemic problems requires the immediate dismantling of departmental silos.
You can't stay in your lane when the whole road is collapsing.
Exactly. The medical department possessed the biological data to diagnose the chemical interference, but they were completely powerless to solve the crisis without engineering's historical data and logistical capability to actually trace the physical infrastructure of a planetary grid.
They needed each other.
There is zero ego involved in this exchange. There is only a seamless, interdepartmental collaboration focused entirely on neutralizing the threat.
And the response from the command structure is just as intense. Captain Sabrina Corbin and Executive Officer Susanna Battenberg don't just hold a meeting, they mobilize the entire
It
shed.
escalated immediately.
They aren't dealing with a few sick patients in a ward anymore. They're dealing with a contaminated water supply feeding thousands of people. Try to imagine the sheer logistical nightmare of that. Captain Corbin has to issue an immediate planetary water consumption advisory without inciting a mass panic.
Which is a very fine line to walk.
She has to organize the replication and deployment of thousands of portable filtration systems to a terrified populace. Meanwhile, she directs the science officer, Commander Storvak, to drop everything and develop a specialized chemical binding agent.
A critical parallel effort. They need a compound that can act as a targeted magnet to pull this degraded polymer out of both the city's massive underground reservoirs and the microscopic bloodstreams of the pediatric patients.
It's attacking the problem from every possible angle.
It is a massive, multi-pronged strategy. Contain the source of the leak, treat the immediate symptoms, and actively stabilize the surrounding environment. But implementing a strategy of that scale requires an immense, almost unfathomable amount of human capital.
It takes a huge toll.
And this is where the logs give us a stark, uncomfortable look at the physical and psychological toll this kind of continuous crisis takes on the crew themselves.
We really see that toll when we go back to Commander Harlan. He's still wedged in that Jeffries tube, pushing himself to the absolute limits of human endurance.
He hasn't stopped.
He has just ordered another lieutenant to finish the tactical array connections so he can dedicate his full bandwidth to the planet's water supply. The log describes him just leaning his head back against the cold metal wall, utterly drained, eyes closed.
Running on fumes.
And that is exactly when Lieutenant Jorik climbs down the ladder and drops into the tube with him. Jorik hasn't come for an engineering update. He has tracked his chief engineer down to perform a mandatory medical physical right there in the maintenance shaft.
Jorik's timing is precise and entirely intentional. He knows with absolute certainty that Harlan will not willingly walk into sickbay during a crisis.
So Jorik brings the sickbay to the Jeffries tube.
And the medical scan reveals exactly what you would expect from someone trying to single-handedly shoulder the weight of a failing system.
It's a physiological disaster. Jorik lists the telemetry out with calm, devastating precision. Harlan is dangerously hypertensive, severely dehydrated, his blood sugar has crashed to critical levels, and his nervous system is vibrating on extremely high levels of caffeine.
With practically zero melatonin or serotonin in his system to regulate his mood or fatigue.
Right. Jorik bluntly informs him that he is well within his medical authority to declare Harlan entirely unfit for duty and forcibly sedate him for 24 hours.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this interaction highlights a fundamental, often ignored truth about leadership and crisis management.
Which is?
Leaders, especially highly dedicated, mission-driven ones like Harlan, will habitually push themselves far past the point of functional viability. They operate under the illusion that their own exhaustion is a necessary, noble sacrifice to solve the problem.
Like they have to suffer to save the day.
Exactly. But Jorik, representing the cold, objective reality of biology, steps in to shatter that logical fallacy. An engineer running on zero sleep and high caffeine is eventually going to make a mathematical error. And in this context, a math error means a filtration system fails and more children die.
Jorik isn't just treating a patient. He's protecting the mission from the engineer's own dangerous dedication. He pulls out a hypo spray and administers a custom mystery mix.
Ah, yes. The mystery mix.
It's a highly specific cocktail he actually invented for Harlan during a previous near disaster on another ship, the Triton. It's a rapid injection blend of glucose, targeted electrolytes, a hypertension stabilizer, a tiny hint of serotonin, and just a mild stimulant.
Just enough to keep him upright.
It's designed to instantly take the edge off the crushing exhaustion. But Jorik makes it very, very clear. This is just a temporary patch on a failing human engine. He gives Harlan a strict, non-negotiable 5-hour deadline. If Harlan isn't in his quarters resting by then, Jorik promises to return with security and forcibly remove him from duty.
That intervention is the turning point. Jorik explicitly tells Harlan, "We need you, but we require you to be functional." Maintaining a highly complex, high-stakes system, whether it's a starship's tactical array or a planetary crisis response, absolutely requires maintaining the physical and mental health of the people operating it.
You cannot save the ship if the crew collapses.
You really can't.
Which actually leads us perfectly into one of the most surprising, yet absolutely vital, sources in our stack today. Far away from the grease of the Jeffries tubes and the sterile panic of the medical labs, there's a completely different kind of work happening on the Arawyn.
A totally different vibe.
We have a brief log from Lieutenant J.G. Ryan Collingway. Ryan is a junior engineering officer currently grinding through double shifts as a punishment for a previous turblift accident. He is exhausted, dealing with the fallout of the tactical repairs alongside Harlan. Yet he personally takes the time to answer a low-priority, seemingly trivial maintenance request in the recreation decks to fix a crashed computer terminal.
And that terminal belongs to Novaryn, the ship's morale director.
The contrast between their two realities is almost jarring. Ryan has been up to his elbows in plasma burns and warp core diagnostics. Allura, meanwhile, is deeply stressed because her terminal crashed while she was trying to organize the ship's recreation schedule.
The stakes seem so low in comparison.
Right. She is frantically trying to figure out how to untangle a scheduling conflict between a Thursday afternoon yoga class and a highly anticipated board game night.
Board games are serious business.
Apparently, the science department is shockingly competitive at strategy board games, and she needs to move the yoga class to the Arboretum, but that suddenly conflicts with the beginner dance class. I was reading this thinking, how does this matter when a planet is falling apart?
To a tactical officer holding a plasma torch or a trauma surgeon reviewing pediatric brain scans, Allura's concerns might seem absurd, but from a Machina-Systems perspective, her work is just as essential to the survival of the ship as engineering or medical.
Really? Just as essential?
Absolutely. Ryan diagnoses the computer crash. It was caused by a faulty software update, the XT1475 patch. And while he sits there running the repair algorithms, the two of them engage in this genuinely sweet, slightly flirtatious banter.
It's a really cute moment in the logs.
She is warmly teasing him about his punishment double shifts, and he's awkwardly but earnestly promising to prioritize building a custom anti-grav hover cart for her supplies once the current crisis is over. It is this quiet, profoundly human moment in the middle of a storm.
It's refreshing.
And that is exactly why this specific log matters so much. Human beings simply cannot sustain constant, uninterrupted red alert levels of stress. Our endocrine systems are not biologically built for it.
We just burn out.
Fast. In the midst of molecular unraveling, failing infrastructure, and severe sleep deprivation, morale work is not a luxury. It is a vital, load-bearing psychological buffer. Allura notes in her own logs that people forget the relaxation of shore leave the very second they step back into their grueling responsibilities.
That makes a lot of sense.
Finding those brief, structured moments of normalcy, whether it's a banter-filled conversation over a fixed terminal or the promised anticipation of a fiercely competitive board game night, that is precisely how a crew survives the relentless, crushing pressure of deep space.
It grounds them. It serves as a reminder of what they're actually trying to save in the first place. When you pull back and look at the entire picture we've painted today, it's incredible how every single thread connects. We started with a few burned hands in an engineering bay.
A tiny anomaly.
The seemingly isolated data point led us to a failing pediatric vaccine on a colony world, which finally revealed a massive, invisible infrastructure collapse beneath a city. So what does this all mean?
That's the big question.
I think the biggest takeaway here is about how we approach deeply stubborn problems. When you are faced with a terrifying issue like a universally trusted vaccine that suddenly refuses to work, you can't just keep staring at the symptom and hoping it changes. Sometimes you literally have to go test the water.
Look beyond the immediate crisis.
You have to step outside the immediate silo of the problem and rigorously investigate the unseen environment surrounding it.
This raises an important question, and it is something I want you to really think about after we sign off today. We spend so much time idolizing the innovators, the brilliant founders who designed the 200-year power grid, or the architects who built the colony.
The visionaries.
Right. But this entire crisis was solved by the maintainers, the people checking the statistical safety logs, the engineers crawling through the dust to patch the pipes, the medical officers treating the symptoms, and even the morale officer organizing the board games.
They did the real work.
We live in a world obsessed with building the next big disruptive thing. But what if the highest, most crucial form of human endeavor isn't innovation at all?
Oh, that's interesting.
The polymer in Kestrel Reach was designed to be perfectly stable for 200 years, yet it unraveled at 50, not through force, but through unseen environmental variables. What perfectly stable systems, beliefs, or foundations in your own life might be quietly unraveling under the surface right now, simply because the environment around them has subtly changed? What if the true heroes of any advanced society are simply the maintainers, the exhausted people working quietly in the background, desperately holding the fragile systems together so the rest of us don't fall apart?
That is a brilliant thought to leave on. The maintainers are the ones keeping the lights on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep checking your systems, appreciate the people who maintain them, and we will catch you next time.